Hear these words from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 58, beginning at the first verse. Shout out and do not hold back. Lift up your voice like a trumpet. Announce to my people their rebellion, to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet day after day they seek me and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that practiced righteousness and did not forsake the ordinance of their God. They ask of me righteous judgments. They delight to draw near to God. Why do we fast, but you do not see? Why humble ourselves, but you do not notice? Look, you serve your own interest on your fast day and oppress all your workers. Look, you fast only to quarrel and to fight and to strike with a wicked fist. Such fasting as you do today will not make your voice heard on high. Is such the fast that I choose, a day to humble oneself? Is it to bow down the head like a bulrush and to lie in sackcloth and ashes? Will you call this a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not the fast that I choose to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, to bring the homeless pour into your house, when you see the naked to cover them, and not to hide yourself from your own kin? Then shall your light break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard, and then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help, and God will say, Here I am. If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then shall your light rise in the darkness, and your gloom be like the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your needs in parched places, and make your bones strong. And you shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters never fail. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in. May these words be to us our light and our life.
Thanks be to God.
Lent has something of a PR problem. Try this and you'll see what I mean. Can you imagine the kids begging to know, is it Lent yet? Or thinking, time to decorate the house for Lent. Or wondering where the office Lent party is going to be this year. Poor Lent. No fireworks, no Santa, no leprechaun, not even a turkey. Just quiet. More than any other seasonal observance, Lent is marked by absence. No gifts to buy and wrap. No cookies to bake. No getting the house ready for guests. No decorations, no cards. For that matter, no flat screen TV sales. No flowers or candy hearts. In fact, no pressure. No stress. No spending more money than you can really afford. No social obligations. No endless to-do lists. No gifts to exchange. When you think about it, Lent itself is a gift to you, a gift of time, of slowing down, of letting go, of doing less. The challenge is to recognize it, to accept it, to let it open a space in your life and then not rush to fill it, but hold it open to see what happens. Imagine the parting of the Red Sea, but without the pursuing Egyptian army. Where would you be if the currents that carry you through the day suddenly parted? A path opened up, and you had time to simply explore, without pressure, this new terrain. How fast, how slow would you walk? What would that look like? How would it feel? How would it change your perception of the other shore? What would you carry with you? What would you set down? What would you give up? Because at one time it was popular to say chocolate, as if giving up chocolate is in any way analogous to the story of Jesus being tempted in the wilderness by Satan. Chocolate? As Isaiah asks, will you call this a fast acceptable to the Lord? Well, maybe that's a bit harsh, but giving up some foods, screen time, the news, it can be meaningful if we spend some time reflecting on the role those things have in our lives, what space they occupy, asking what they add to our lives, asking to what extent they are simply distractions. To give up something for Lent simply because it's Lent is as meaningless as bargain shopping for mattresses to celebrate President's Day. There is a place for Lenten fasting, but I find Lent more meaningful when I think of it as a time to focus not on what I might give up, but on what I can take in. What can I make space for within me? Things like beauty, wonder, gratitude, compassion. We live in such a world of noise and distraction. Robocalls, emails, ads coming at us from every direction, our phone pinging, ringing, calling us to it. There are constant and competing demands on our time and attention, and that's the point. In this over-the-top, commoditized world, we are the commodities that are being bought and sold. Or rather, I should say, it's our attention that's being bought and sold. To get our attention, the big tech companies are using more frequent and more intrusive methods all of the time. Our thoughts scatter under such an onslaught. Our emotions are pulled this way and that, from waking to sleeping all day long, and sometimes we wake up in the middle of the night with some stupid jingle going through our heads that we cannot get rid of. Lent is about the parting of the Red Sea, parting all of that noise and distraction, opening up a space in our lives for meditation, for prayer, for reflection, for engaging with the notion that if we travel more slowly, we just might be different people when we reach the other shore. There is a flow to life and human unfolding, a turning in, a turning out. It's essential to spiritual understanding and psychological development. Times of activity, of doing, times of reflection, of simply being. We need that balance, and too often that balance is missing in the lives that we live. If we are constantly distracted, constantly operating only on the surface, we can't attend to our real need for depth, for the time underground, when the seed is planted in the dark soil and the roots are taking hold, but the sprout has not yet broken through the surface. That's the season of Lent, of attending to the mystery of unseen growth taking place underground, out of sight. Lent gives us social permission to slow down. It's an invitation to think seriously about how we fill our days and what we take into our being. Lent is an invitation to creative renewal through music, poetry, art. It's about cultivating the relationships that enrich our lives. Lent brings water to our parched places, offering strength, healing, and growth. The 40 days of Lent are traditionally associated with the period in Jesus' life when for 40 days he was in the wilderness and where he was tempted by 3 different kinds of power: personal, political, and economic. He turned them all down. He chose instead the transforming power of God. He returned to the cities and the towns to take up his ministry, a ministry that would lead to his death, but to something else too. He made a choice that echoed the words of Isaiah, but that continues to resonate with us today. And this was his choice. There is an alternative to empire. And it is to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free. It is to share bread with the hungry and to bring the homeless poor into your house. There are 3 spiritual practices that are traditionally associated with Lent: prayer, fasting, that's the one that gets most of the attention, and acts of charity. Prayer is justice toward God. Fasting is justice towards oneself. Acts of charity are justice toward the neighbor. These days, that broader context has been lost in the popular notion of giving things up for Lent, sacrificing some pleasure or some material enjoyment as if that puts us in solidarity with Jesus. But in our emphasis on giving things up, we lose sight of the flip side, which is what we take in, what we strengthen in ourselves, what we affirm. Solidarity with Jesus means the practice of justice. It means aligning ourselves not with the personal, the political, or the economic kinds of power, but with the transforming power of God. It requires attention, not the fractured kind demanded from us all day by our devices. It requires attention. So this Lenten season, give yourself the gift of time and focused attention. Periods of the day set aside to absorb the reality of God's presence, to affirm with Jesus that there is a power greater than the world, what the world recognizes as power, that there is with God the promise, always, the promise of transformation, and in the midst of darkness, temptation, and even death, there is always a new beginning. Our theme this Lenten season is living your discipleship. You might notice that the theme doesn't ask you to reflect on what you need to believe about Jesus in order to be saved. It asks you to reflect on what he taught, not what others have said about him, whether during his lifetime or in the centuries that have followed. Just reflect on what Jesus taught. And then ask yourself what it means to follow those teachings. Now, in this time, in this place, in your shoes. Lent is an ancient observance that disrupts modern life, not with noise, but with silence. It takes us from surface chatter to a deeper dialogue that is already always underway. It opens up liminal space, the space between what was and what can be, that is the beginning of all meaningful change. Lent is all of these things, and, of course, none of them. Lent opens the space, parts the sea. The next step is up to us.
For the darkness of waiting, of not knowing what is to come, of staying ready and quiet and attentive, we praise you, O God.
For the darkness and the light are both alike to you.
For the darkness of staying silent, for the terror of having nothing to say, and for the greater terror of needing to say nothing, we praise you, O God.
For the darkness and the light are both alike to you.
For the darkness of choosing when you give us the moment to speak and act and change, and we cannot know what we have set in motion, but we still have to take the risk. We praise you, O God.
For the darkness and the light are both alike to you.
For the darkness of hoping in a world which longs for you. For the wrestling and laboring of all creation, for wholeness and justice and freedom, we praise you, O God.
For the darkness and light are alike to you. You are now invited to receive the imposition of ashes either on your forehead or on your hand in the sign of the cross. When we receive ashes, we remember our mortality, that just as God breathed life into dust to create us, we will one day return to dust. And we remember too God's promise that before we were even born, God loved us as part of God's great creation, and after we die, we continue to be part of that love. At this time, you may come forward if you desire. Each of us in every age must decide what it means to follow Jesus. In this Lenten season, may your discernment be guided by the Spirit of God and the gospel teaching. Go in peace.
Thanks be
to God.